probably a good idea. Well, he prints one out. I don't want to be up here going, uh-oh. One more minute here. Who wants to do the board norms? Diane? Do you do the board norms? Okay. Okay. Ready, Sally? It's 5:15. We'll call this regular meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody in the audience this evening, and would you please stand and recite the pledge with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on the agenda is board norms. Diane, would you like to read that?
The board developed norms are: decisions will be based on the board's strategic plan, its mission, and what's best for students. The board will act as stewards of tax dollars. Board members will complete foundation work to be prepared for meetings. Meetings will be efficient. All perspectives will be voiced and heard. All board members will maintain a professional decorum.
Thank you, Diane. We have nothing under public communication. Any conflicts of interest to declare? None. Moving to consent agenda. Motion to approve. Motion by Brenda, seconded by Jennifer. Any discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving into our regular agenda, we have nothing under recognition or correspondence. Under reports, do we have student council report? No.
We will address that to make sure they get that
They
on the
come.
calendar.
Okay. Next, we have the Citizens Advisory Committee report. Who wants to take that, or?
I could start, and Steve, Sally, feel free to chime in here too. One of the things we felt that was important to do, the Citizens Advisory Committee has met 3 times, and as the board is aware, the role of that committee is to review current status of our facilities, and ultimately make a recommendation to the board in terms of next steps. Like I said, the committee's met 3 times thus far. That's not including the facility tours. In this last meeting, we asked to have a few more patrons present, so we reached out and kind of had everybody bring a guest, or try to bring a guest. And so we reviewed some of what we've been working on, focusing really on 2 different areas: educational adequacy and our facility needs. Those are really the 2 primary focuses, looking at not only what are those infrastructure needs that we all saw when we walked through those facilities, but then how are the facilities meeting or not meeting the needs of the student, needs of the teachers in the classroom. That's the educational adequacy piece. We also then talked about enrollment, that the enrollment projections, as we know from when we saw them very briefly last month, or last meeting, I should say, hold off until you get a sense for context. Let's wait until our Rob Schwartz from RSP and Associates is here. We can ask some questions. I wanted to get you those enrollment projections in your hands prior to that so you could take a look at them. But there's a lot of context that we're missing from what RSP and Associates shares with us in terms of, like I said, that context, that bigger piece, the why, not just the what. And so we talked a little briefly about that, and really a lot about, like I said, getting people up to speed, that review of what's already happened, just to kind of go through it. And there is that running document, that living document, I should say, that you see in your drive and that can be accessed online. the tours for each of the building, I'd asked for the committee members during that time to just share some takeaways. So what are your takeaways from those tours? I'll just read them. The issues are district-wide, so it's not just one building or two buildings. They're across the district. Surprised at how much infrastructure needs we have. Want to be proactive and prevent problems from getting larger. Issues are similar across the district, particularly at the elementary level, boilers, roofing, windows. That one goes across the district. But those are some of the things. Energy savings will be realized with replacement systems. A great example of that is the boiler systems, as we talked about in 4 of our elementary buildings. The heating systems are either from 1958 or 1960. Very likely, just in energy efficiency, you could pay off a new boiler in 3 to 5 years. So, and that's kind of what that was getting to is just the energy savings that come with those replacement systems. Short on space for small work group, collaboration, testing in some schools, using every ounce of space that we can get. You know, might be small groups in the entryways, in very small rooms, offices, replacing or putting our teacher lounge, turning that into a place where students meet, because that's just the space we have, and that's, you know, that's kind of teachers in a nutshell. They'll take the space that they can get and do the absolute best that they can, but the space isn't ideal. Safety concerns, pick up and drop off students, so that was a concern that came up. Handicap accessibility needs, air quality issues was one that came through constantly as we talked. Not just you know, I think when we think about air quality, sometimes we're thinking about the smell. It's not just, you know, more than the smell, you're talking about the oxygenation. You know, how much oxygen is there, the temperature, control of the humidity. We have allergy needs for students, all those things that we need to take into account. And we also talked about the capital maintenance plan. Again, as the board is aware, that 10-year project plan that says in the next 10 years we expect to spend how many dollars on what projects to ensure that that infrastructure gets taken care of. And we've talked about that bubble. There is a bubble coming where even with the 10 mills that we levy for our building needs every year, we probably have twice, from a cost standpoint, we have twice the amount of need than we have over that 10-year span. So that bubble's coming where those boiler systems are going to have to be replaced. And it isn't so much about can they run and are they running? Sure they do. They're doing, you know, we're maintaining those, but at some point that system has extended its life, and those are the discussions that we had. So beyond that, we did have that discussion, like I said, about the 21st century education. We kind of restated some discussions we'd had we asked Mr. Gaylor, Mr. Hardy, Mrs. Clemens to present on the needs at their different levels or where they see education moving in the next 10 years or so, and how our facilities can meet those needs. Sally or Steve, anything that I kind of went through that a little quick, but and again, all this referenced online for those that are interested as part of the agenda. But
Heidi, you had a question? Or Steve?
I guess, yeah, that's a good summary. We did see from DLR some amazing buildings that a high school that didn't have hallways. That was a new concept to me, I guess, but every ounce of space was used there. And a lot of that's probably out of what we're trying to do here, but it was good to see. And we aren't necessarily saddled by a certain dollar amount next time, so we could maybe, you know, we could look a lot bigger. We could maybe go smaller. That's what we're looking for input here, I guess. So.
Heidi, you know?
Yeah, just one thing I kind of on the tours, I appreciate the ability to go on those, but and that you scheduled those, you know, visually things look nice. You know, they were decorated, everything on the surface, really, I mean, wow, our teachers do a fantastic job making those rooms look comfortable and in a nice environment. But underneath, just even the buildings we've added on, just getting airflow, Wi-Fi connectivity, they just get the students going on something and it gets dropped because it's being stretched so far. There's just so many things that underneath, the heating, cooling systems, and just general air movement in the buildings, you really started to, when it was pointed out and we could see those areas you don't see when you enter the school, like the boiler room, it became very apparent of the needs in every building. Superintendent-elect, if people weren't able to go on those tours, or I know the advisory committee are about the same time when they're being held, I haven't even been able to attend some. If people have input in our communities watching, if they have some input or just some things that they'd like to bring up that they'd like to see, how can they convey that? Or even if some people still want to do a building tour, how can that be arranged?
Well, if anybody is interested, whether they've been on tours or just interested in sharing some input, they could always stop by the central office, visit with me, give me a call, 252-1950, email, you can access that through the website, or attend a meeting. We publish those. Those are open meetings to the public. The Citizens Advisory is a core group, but we are open to whoever comes. And so anybody that comes becomes a member of that group. And if they want to attend one meeting or multiple meetings, that's great. We just want input. And that's one of the reasons why we reached out and tried to broaden that net a little bit with our Citizens Advisory and bring a guest, because we felt we weren't getting a wide enough demographic look at Jamestown. So we wanted that to be a representative group. So we're hearing all perspectives. And so if you can't make it, if you can't communicate if you can't make it, give me a call, stop by and visit, email, however you best communicate. We'd be happy to share whatever input I get will come to the committee.
Diane, do you have a question?
Not a question, a comment there. This is a great summary, and it can be accessed, and I encourage people to do that. It really looks backwards at what we've done and what we're doing now. The other comment I would make is I did go on all the tours, and I got the definite sense that we're getting by on a song and a prayer right now, because when you're talking about 1958, 1960, that's 60 years ago, and there is a bubble coming. We can't continue at this pace because something's bound to give. And the roofs and the boiler rooms were, I would use the word sobering or frightening. Something needs to be done, and I did not realize until I took the tours just how outdated we are and what we need.
And I think a good takeaway from that too is our maintenance people have done an excellent job of maintaining what we have, and I think that's an important point, that those are certainly not systems that are ignored. They are just systems that are reaching the end of their lifespan. And so to me, the takeaway is we've done a good job in maintaining. It's time to recognize, though, that those systems have reached the end of their lifespans or are close to that, and it's time to plan ahead. The other items that we discussed is just how do we communicate? We're a small group. How do we communicate out about the needs? And so we've talked about some communication strategies, as well as, in education, just like other professions, we talk in education language. We say things like flexible learning spaces, and people don't always understand what those things mean and what the vision for education is. And because we know what we experienced, we don't always know what those in education are visioning for in the future. And so that's one thing we talked about too, is looking at engaging the community in a discussion about what education should be looking like or what we should be striving for. A good way to do that, and I know this has been done in some communities, is showing the documentary Most Likely to Succeed, and then engaging the community in a discussion about what that might look like in Jamestown. And there's things, as I think anybody that would watch that would say, Boy, there's some great things, there's some challenging things, and there's maybe some things that wouldn't work for us. But I think it's important to have that conversation about what that could look like, so then we can gauge what do we want to look like. So those are, I think, in a nutshell. And Sally, unless you had anything else. Nutshell, I guess I took about 10 minutes, but.
One quick question I have, Rob, is it possible, the document that's going on, it's online now on our website, is it possible to put pictures there of some, like the boilers and stuff, just to show people that if they're not comfortable coming forward and saying, well, what does that look like? You can put it on there and say, boy, that looks like it does. So to echo some of the other things that were said, as far as condition of things, so.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Maybe we can put together some kind of virtual tour or
Yeah.
something like that. And even if it's just pictures, I think we could do some other things too,
Yeah.
but it's a good idea.
Heidi?
Maybe our new student media club would be interested in doing a little documentary.
Speak for them, but.
Maybe they would, yes.
Okay, next is we got the North Dakota School Board Association Negotiation Seminar. Any comments from the board members that were there, or learn anything, or Bob?
Well, I thought the discussion about the state's budget forecast, especially not so much this year, this biennium. I think we all know that it's going to be a struggle, but there is a savings account that's going to somewhat lessen the blow. But there's a lot of concerns about the next biennium, and when the savings account is gone, especially from the education standpoint, the stabilization fund, that's going to be gone, or mostly gone anyway. So that was, on a bummer side, that was the part. But overall, the day was great. Good presentations, and it was really, they always do a good job with the presentation. So thanks for allowing us to be at that.
Diane?
I was there just half a day on Friday, and I really liked the way they put down some basics for those of us that had never been through negotiations. I thought it was very well done, and I especially liked hearing from school districts and how they conduct their negotiations. Very educational, and I thought it was a day well spent.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I was able to attend for the whole day on Friday, and what I really took away from it was there were some really great success stories and really good opportunities to learn from other school districts. But what I appreciated from the North Dakota School Board Association is it was very much a guideline. It wasn't a you need to do it this way. It was very much respected that you need to do what's best for your community. And that was really important, because what we do here in Jamestown in negotiations does not need to be the same as what they do in Harvey. And so I really appreciated that these are guidelines, but you need to do what's best for you. So I did appreciate that.
Any other comments? The only comment I would have to echo Bob's is that it was looking grim as far as money coming forward from the legislators, so. Any other comments, or none? Okay. Moving on to superintendent's report. Rob?
Okay, I have updated some of the legislative, or some of the bills that we've been tracking and discussing. I did provide some testimony. Senate Bill 2275, that was the restraint seclusion legislation. I did testify in opposition to that just because of how it was worded. Ultimately that received a do not pass and failed on the Senate floor. So it was, as you know, and I included as an addendum, the bulk of districts do have policies that govern restraint seclusion, and those are, best left to decide at that local level of how that should look. And one other one I wanted to point out, 1361. I talked about this previously. That was the 3% funding. If you remember, the cap now is 12%. You can increase in dollars 12% in local revenue. This would limit that to 3%. And in committee, that was amended to say an effective start date of 2019, and that the 3% did not include schools. So that actually passed through committee and then passed the House floor with that amendment. So 3% not related to schools, effective start date to 2019. So obviously that has to go crossover in the Senate, and that's a pretty significant change of a bill. But wanted to point that out, that did change related to local funding. 1382, we talked about that before. That was the voucher bill that did receive a due pass, but only after it was amended to only be a study, which is not atypical in a situation similar to that. I don't know if there's questions on those at all. I'd be happy to answer any if there was. I did see the new loan forgiveness, 2243, that passed in the Senate this morning. So that'll be crossing over one of the few bills with a fiscal note that's seeming to pass anywhere. Construction management at risk, I have the agreement. Sally and I met with Jim Paris to talk that through. It really, literally line by line of that document, it was pretty substantial discussion. We have sent that off to the DLR group to review. They use a similar type of agreement. And then if we feel it's necessary, we would take it to legal counsel also. The changes that are there, that's a very standard document. The AIA document is very standard. And if you had a chance to look at that, the document outlines specifically where and how any change from the standard document was made. And we went through each of those changes. There was, I had no concern, but like I said, there's still a review process that I think is important that we go through. But I would be happy to answer questions on those also. I gave some examples for first readings and how we might lump those together, again, just to expedite things. When you're talking a policy with exhibits and administrative regulations, I think you can, I would recommend that you consolidate those. The exhibits are part of the policy. I think you can do those all in one lump. I think that would make that a little easier to manage. I included the evaluation timeline again. Accessibility changes. As we went through and started looking, as you know, we've been studying that accessibility. As Pam Brown, and she's done an amazing job, she really has, hours and hours of work she's devoted to accessibility of our website, and came to the conclusion that there's more time and effort and money going into updating than there would be to just start new. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through and just start fresh. That's the better plan. It's more respectful of her time and really the resources that we're expending. I would rather do it the right way from scratch than try to fix what we didn't feel was accessible. So,
Mike?
Instead of missing something and having a problem further down the line?
right. It was, there continued to be errors that are just going to take time to fix. And rather than fixing something, it's just easier to start fresh, so we ensure that we don't have any from the get-go. And the hope is, we're going to start to do that. So the beginning of the year next year is the goal, that we would start the beginning of the school year with an updated website, cleaner, more functional, more what we want, and then includes the increased accessibility.
Heidi? Oh, Jennifer?
So I see that we use the platform through EduTech, and we're not obviously the only school. So is EduTech doing anything to fix this problem?
I couldn't answer that question for EduTech, but I can say that the EduSites no longer meets our needs. So it was time to move on from that platform.
Heidi?
I attended I'm on the technology committee, and I attended the meeting last week. I think it was last week or the week before. When Pam has done a lot of research into this, and when she pulled up some samples of sites that or of the platforms that we're looking at, it became very obvious, very apparent, very quickly how far away what we have is from where we need to be. And in some instances, just looking at those sites, I wondered even if our site could ever even get to that. And a lot of it is, it's very visible right away that they're accessible, and the different options of accessibility are just built right into the whole site. So, like I said, when she pulled it up, you could see pretty quickly that it was a big difference, so.
Rob?
2 points. The first is we've sent Pam to some accessibility training, and she's really done a great job and has become highly skilled in this area, and so we're very fortunate. And then the other component is when we look at a new website, there's other functionality benefits that that are driving this decision too. It's not that we couldn't go through and make what we have accessible. It's just that if we're going to spend those resources anyway, why not have a website that meets our needs and is accessible? So that was kind of the driving force for us. And I guess that is what I have outside of what's already stated on the agenda. If people have questions, I'd be happy to
Heidi?
answer.
I was just going to add to my comments. I meant the features on the site.
Yeah.
That's what I was referring to. Some of the sites have a lot of really useful features for us that our site just doesn't have available. So thank you.
Okay. Diane?
I hope I'm not the only person with this question, but on superintendent evaluation, when I open the agenda, I do whatever it tells me to do. And I find that I'm repeating sections. Is that what I'm supposed to be doing? Or should I be tracking what I've already done and not repeat?
So you, once a month, you can do it multiple times, but you do the sections each month that are outlined in the agenda. So yes, if you're doing it every meeting, you would do it more than once, but also they're on a rotational basis, so you're going to get section one more than once. The idea being, let's get a holistic look rather than one snapshot in time, to get a better feedback loop, probably a more robust assessment.
So what I'm doing is
Yes.
just, okay.
Like tonight's meeting, it's one and three that you do, yep, so, okay.
Yep, you
Okay.
can do as much
Yep.
as you want to. That's what's.
Okay, any other questions, Rob? None. Moving on to board education, personnel procedures.
So when one of the exhibits, and this has happened twice with new school board association policies. They've done exhibits with FAQs, and I think they're really well done. And the reason that I like them is it's not only for board members but for any person. These are kind of commonly asked burning questions that people think about when they talk about certain issues. There's one on FERPA. There's a FAQ on FERPA. There's now an FAQ on personnel complaints. And I thought I would run through them just as a piece of board education, because it's always good to either learn it for the first time or relearn and hear it again. But it's also good for the people listening, in that the fact that they can also access these same policies and exhibits. But sometimes these questions come up and people have these. Well, if you're a board member, why this? Or what happens when this happens? So I thought I'd go through these questions maybe a little more briefly than what's outlined. But if anybody wants to kind of explore these questions more, they could always go online, seek out this under our board education, and they could explore it a little bit more. But the first question, does the district need to wait for a formal complaint to be filed before investigating an incident related to a school employee? And the answer is no. It's the difference between can and must. You always, anytime you hear a complaint that might initiate an investigation, but filing a complaint then requires us to go through and investigate. So it's just the difference between might and must. The second question, who should conduct the investigation? And that really depends on policy. It does, though, state typically board members aren't involved in that kind of an investigation. The reason, as our board is aware, is the impartiality of the board. If this event ever does graduate into a bigger issue and it comes before the board and say a non-renewal for cause hearing The board's responsibility is to provide due process. If you're involved in the investigation, you couldn't provide due process. So that's why, and that question comes up, I think, oftentimes for people in the community to say, well, you don't know about that? Well, our job isn't to know about that. That's the administrator's job to know about that right now. If it comes to us, we need to be impartial so we can provide due process. And you'll see that that kind of as a theme throughout these questions. Should the board answer questions about the incident at a board meeting or on an individual basis when approached by the public? Really, no, and it's the same reasons. You're supposed to be that impartial last step. You're the decision maker in terms of those things. And if you do it at a public board meeting, it could be subject to libel and slander. So you also have to be careful about that. And, you know, how do you respond to somebody when they're asking that question? Well, what is happening? Well, the investigation process has been initiated. That the investigators are determining what's happening and they'll take the appropriate steps. You know, that is the answer. But again, the reason being that the board is the impartial party. Can a board go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter or the details of an investigation? No, you only have the ability to go into executive session for 4 things. That's not one of them. You'll go into executive session potentially later on tonight. That's one of the reasons you can go into executive session. So what's entailed in an investigation? Again, like everything, that it depends on the situation. But kind of the typical investigation could include things like gathering evidence. You might be looking at school security footage, reviewing emails, browsing logs, interviews with bystanders, those kinds of things. It really depends on what the issue is. But I guess what's entailed in an investigation, whatever needs to be, so you can get to the answer that you need to get to. So 6, can an employee be placed on administrative leave during an investigation? Should the board be informed or vote on this? So an employee can be placed on administrative leave with pay pending the outcome of an investigation. The board should not be involved in decisions concerning leave, administrative leave. The board should grant authority to school administration to place employees on leave through policy. So you have that voice as a board member, but it's the voice in setting policy. The administrator's job is to execute policy. So you have that power in policy, but not through the execution. So administrative leave, different than suspension. Only the board can suspend. That's not something that you do through policy. That is something that you do through action. How much information should a superintendent provide to the board after an investigation? Again, impartiality of the board is the issue. You should know that an investigation is complete, and that's it. That it has been completed. That's what the role of the board is. How should the board respond after an investigation is complete? You don't devote meeting time to the outcome. The questions concerning the investigation should be referred to whoever the board designates as a spokesperson. That could be the board president. That could be the superintendent. It depends on what policy states. If there is we may choose to put out a press release or of some nature to explain if this is something that is pertinent for the public. That would be something that we would do that way. Is the information gathered during an investigation open record? Yes, it is. There are some limitations. It has to be closed for 60 days, and that's a century code issue. But after 60 days, it is open record like any other record is open. So what are the possible outcomes of an investigation? You could have a lot of different things, but it could run that continuum from there's no wrongdoing found to recommendation for termination. Anything in between. You could be talking a letter of reprimand. You could be in a plan of improvement. You could have a letter of reprimand and a plan of improvement. Recommendations for non-renewal. All of those things could take place, but anything within that continuum of we didn't find any wrongdoing all the way to termination. What type of documentation should be placed in the personnel file? District maintains records of the investigation. it really just depends on the situation. Again, like I've said with other, it is somewhat situational, but oftentimes that can be found in the personnel file. How is the investigation of a superintendent or business manager different? The reason is because I would be the investigatory body as the superintendent for anybody else, and I can't investigate myself. Sally couldn't investigate me because she is on the same level, that she's works through the board. So it's similar to Sally's situation as a business manager. I wouldn't be the appropriate investigatory body because of the business manager position. In that situation, it would go to likely the president of the school board. And that's how policy, what we do. If that complaint is made against the superintendent business manager, then the board president becomes the investigatory body. And then all the rules follow similarly as we've already outlined. But if you have questions, I'd be happy to respond to any. Also, if there are questions or people want to look more at this policy, like I said, it is online and anybody can access that if they wish to.
Any questions on that? Nope, good information though. Moving on, any old business? Hearing none, moving into new business. We have nothing under activities or building or grounds, nothing under curriculum. Number 4, finance, the budget revision, detailed revision. Sally?
There's 2 reports, and I'm just going to go over the summary. If you have any questions on the detail, I'd be happy to answer them. These are budget revisions, typically for federal programs or grants, that we receive that we need to adjust the budget and bring forth to you. And the first one is a Title II reallocated, and those funds are using for professional development for 3 days for 20 teachers for the process for building standards-based projects, in which Adam Gaylor is the leader of that. So that's what those funds. Whenever Rob sees a grant, he says, "Sally." The next one is the North Dakota Education Technology Council grant, and the middle school purchased some Chromebooks with those. They were awarded a $4,880 grant, and those funds will be used for that. The Title VI grant is state funding, and that's another professional development that Joe Hagelin is leading, and that's 8 days of on-site professional development for interventions for MTSS pathways. Okay, and then our vocational rehab grant that we talked about last September. The grant is for approximately $54,000. Well, we're getting it up and running. Got someone hired in January. So I'm estimating, that the revenue and expenditures will be about $22,530. So I'm just adjusting the budget for those revenue and expenditures. And we'll see how that grant goes. It's pretty exciting. And then just some guidelines for federal reducing budget supplies for a couple schools of $2,000. So below you can see the general fund budget of $28,736, $151,94, and the revisions, adding to the expenditures and on the revenue side. So there's really only a net budget change of the reduction of $2,000. Any questions?
We need a motion to approve that.
Yes.
Yep, there's a motion. Motion by Bob, seconded by Heidi. Any discussion on it? Hearing none, assuming a roll call vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Then the general fund is there for information, Sally, or? And then the monthly, moving to C, is there a motion to approve the monthly financials? Motion by Jennifer, seconded by Diane. Any discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on to personnel, is there a motion to approve the one-year leave of absence for this 2017-18 school year for Barb Williams, .56 FTE, elementary physical education teacher. And before you make the motion, there is a recommendation coming from Rob as far as contingent on a full hire, or, so, Rob?
I would just recommend that, anytime with a part-time contract, that becomes difficult to fill, and I think it's good practice to make that a contingent approval, assuming that we can find somebody to take that spot. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, motion, seconded by Bob. Any other discussion? Hearing none? Oh, okay.
Willie, are you foreseeing a large difficulty in finding this? Because, you do want to allow her to go, but I'm thinking we should be able to find somebody, to do that for a year, but I'm not a teacher, so I just wanted to get a good temperature on that.
Rob?
I wish I could give you a great answer. I really don't. It really depends on who's out qualified. And, obviously we don't just look for warm bodies. We look for great teachers. And so finding a good replacement, the difficulty comes, finding any position now is difficult, that we don't have as many as we like candidates, and less than full-time creates a different challenge because somebody has to be willing to work at less than full-time. So I wish I could say, yes, it won't be a problem, but I probably wouldn't make the recommendation if I wasn't concerned about not being able to find. But I'm hopeful.
Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll. Oh, yep, there was second. Yep, Bob took a second, so. No other discussion, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving into policy and procedures, is there a motion to rescind the extracurricular activity FFE policy? Motion by Brenda, seconded by Steve. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to the next one, B through K. No, Rob, those are second readings, correct?
What I would recommend, with the second reading, I think you can approve all of the second readings, but those are all the same policy. Just as I outlined in my board report, I would suggest that you could lump together any administrative regulation or exhibit, board regulation, along with the policy. So, in my opinion, or my recommendation, approval of the second reading of policy FFE and corresponding administrative regulations, something to that effect. We did do that one last time. And then at the sixth, second reading. Yes.
Heidi? Oh,
I just want to clarify, I don't think my agenda reloaded, but these are second readings, so not
correct.
first, right?
Correct.
Yep, okay.
Yep. Jennifer? Mike?
I move to approve policy FFE, including the corresponding administrative regulations.
Second? Heidi seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving into, those covered A through K, correct?
No.
Just that first one,
That did A through D.
A through D. Okay, moving to E, is there a motion for a first reading of the title programs dispute resolution procedure, GAB-DB? Motion by Brenda. Seconded by Greg. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to letter F, is there a motion to rescind the patron complaints KABB policy? Motion by Heidi, seconded by Diane. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to letter G, now these are all second readings, correct?
No, those are first readings.
Those are first readings, okay. Is there a motion for the first reading of the patron complaints, KACA policy?
I move to approve policy KACB and corresponding exhibits.
Which would be,
You're in KACA right now.
Are we on
Yep, just that one.
right,
I motion
okay, is there a second? Second by Bob, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now to H, is there a motion for the first reading of the complaints about personnel, KACBA policy?
I motion to approve KACB and corresponding exhibits.
Which would be I, J, and K? Okay. There a second? Second by Brenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to number 7, tuition. Is there a motion to approve a 10th grade student, two 10th grade students, and a 9th grade student to attend Montpelier Public Schools for the 2016-17 school year? Motion by Brenda, seconded by Diane. Any discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to number 8, is there a motion to approve to submit reconfiguration of instructional days? Rob, you want?
Just a comment, we are required to do these, to do our early dismissals, and that's what this request is.
Motion by Jennifer, seconded by Diane. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to Roman numeral 4, items for future agenda. If there is something, just let Rob or myself know, and we'll make sure we get it on the agenda. Meetings to be scheduled, we have the next school board meeting Monday, March 6th, 5:15 here in the Thompson Room. We also have the next item on the agenda is monthly superintendent evaluation is sections 1 and 3. And moving to Roman numeral 7, executive session. Somebody want to read that? Oh, what's that?
SEC right now is planning a conference call meeting February 28th from noon to 1.
Okay. Okay. Diane?
I, Diane Hansen, believe that discussion with our negotiators and developing a strategy relative to the school board's position in this matter in open session would have an adverse fiscal effect on the negotiations position of the board. Therefore, I move that the board enter into executive session, that the following members and negotiators be identified as being present: school board members Greg Allen, Diane Hansen, Roger Hout, Heidi Larson, Brenda Romick, Jennifer Schmidt, Robert Toso, Steve Veldkamp, Superintendent Robert Leck, and Business Manager Sally Ost. That the time and date are February 20th, 2017, 6 p.m. That the following topic will be considered in executive session: negotiation strategies. That the legal authority for the executive session is Section 44-04-19.1 of the North Dakota Century Code, and that the executive session be recorded.
Is there a second? Seconded by Greg. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Then we'll be back to, after executive session, to close the regular meeting, so.